Hello and welcome to Indie Book Magic, a podcast that connects geek readers and writers in an open, lighthearted, and occasionally random environment. We're your friendly hosts, Janeen Ippolito and
H.L. Burke.
We are glad to have you here today to discuss romance in writing. Now, we're not talking about romance writing, so Heidi here is going to explain what we're actually focusing on today.
Yeah, today we're going to be discussing methods and parameters, not necessarily personalities or character arcs, but more tropes and essentials. Because some things that you find in romance, the reason you might not like it might not be the trope, it might not be the structure of it. It may just be that you're not really getting along with these people. Because, not everybody wants to hang out with the mean girl from high school and her hot boyfriend.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Heidi. Like with these tropes, the tropes are just writing tools that you can use to add them to your story. We're not talking about, actually liking these characters. And you often find in romantic main stories, like romantic novels, and then even in subplots, that sometimes writers will use the same couple of personalities. And if you don't like those personalities, if you're not a huge fan of an alpha male, or if you don't like the strong-willed but incredibly emotionally
erratic,
then you may decide, well, I don't like these tropes. I don't like, this kind of romance. And it doesn't mean that you don't like romance or romantic subplots in your stories. It just means that those personalities aren't your favorite.
Yeah, see, I don't dislike romance. I dislike people being petty and emotionally immature.
Which can be whole sections of romance, especially when you're going for certain, there are certain genres like YA where, of course, they're going to be emotionally immature, and sometimes they're teenagers.
If you're aiming at audiences that like kind of that soap opera drama, and that is a thing, it's a nice, I want to say popcorn, whatever the romantic option of a popcorn movie is. It's instead of explosions and gunfights, it's drama, And
there are people who go for that. At the same time, we are also not saying you suddenly have to write romance, and we're not suddenly saying that this podcast is turning into the all romance podcast here. What we are saying is that these methods can be useful in a lot of different kinds of stories. A lot of people I know will sometimes go out of their way to say they don't like romance, as if it's kind of this, badge of courage or something. But the thing is, it's just a way of writing the story. It's just an element to use the same way you add in fight scenes, or you add in political intrigue, or you add in family conflict. It's just another tool in your writer's toolkit. And there are really fun ways to use romance and romantic elements in stories without making your story all mushy-gushy all the time.
Yeah, and I think that it's actually kind of freeing in specfic because you don't have to always necessarily hit the romance beats so on the head like you might if you're writing for a straight romance audience. And there are a lot of romantic tropes that can really fit well into specfic or fantasy or sci-fi. We're just going to be covering some of the most common ones. I know we can't, unless we want to do a 24-hour podcast, which might be in the future if we get enough caffeine. I don't think we can hit all of them today.
That would be, how much coffee or soda or something would they even tune in for that? Oh my goodness.
I don't know. And how would we do bathroom breaks?
We would have the porg be the person to run things, right? You'd be listening to the porg sounds. Wow, we're handling.
We should do a 24-hour charity live stream someday, but they'd have to donate $20,000 to our favorite charity or something.
Sounds good to me. Hear that, listeners? Just donate the money.
A lot of my favorite tropes actually involve destiny because I think it's such a pretty word, and we just can't resist a pretty word. Some aspects of that include my favorites, Starcrossed lovers, because there's nothing better than when you've got a couple and they want to be together, but there's something standing in the way that they have to fight against each other, together. I think that's, for me, so much easier than making two characters fight against each other. So, I think when we think star-crossed lovers, we immediately go to Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of it's not the original, but it's the big trope, and it's the one that we think of. And there's a lot of hate for Romeo and Juliet because they were stupid teenagers and they did die.
Themselves at the end, that's not I think one of the big issues with Romeo and Juliet isn't necessarily the star-crossedness. It's at the end, it's so dang tragic. They give up in a way. They're not trying to, but they make a lot of dumb mistakes that you're just thinking, if you had just given a little more time to this, you guys could have gotten away and been happy together. Or you feel cheated of the happily ever after.
Yeah, I think it's that they were in love with love, and instead of being totally focused on saving the other, what's a good like, if the star-crossed lovers are like focused on saving each other and keeping each other safe, I think that adds another element, especially if one person is trying to kill the other, or what's standing in between them is something really unreasonable that needs to be conquered in itself.
Yeah, I had one trope that I've seen with this done in some different books, and I played around with it in the story is, two people from like two assassins falling in love, or two people who are at odds because of their positions, kind of like Romeo and Juliet, but their personalities really connect through that. And, they'll turning those talents into fighting for the relationship. And there's something very appealing about that. We like the idea of rooting people who are actually trying to fight for something good for each other. And of course, going along with star-crossed lovers, a real way to mess it up is to make the actual like relationship and romance super unhealthy. Yeah. Really codependent, add some real serious codependency in there and everything, and you have a surefire way of making some of your readers go, what? Can we just get these guys to therapy?
So many characters their problems would be solved. Some good therapy, or like just adding in phones for communication so you don't accidentally kill yourself.
Yeah, these things would be, we can just solve all the issues with all the major tropes right now just by giving them all cell phones.
I know.
Introduce a lot of new problems along with it. So,
yes.
Another thing going on with Destiny tropes besides star-crossed lovers is fate bonds. And these are often like used synonymously with mating bonds from like shifter romances and such, but you can have a fate bond without it having to be like all alpha male and sassy female and those kind of things. It's just a matter of two people who are in some way biochemically or magically or spiritually or destiny-ishly meant to be together.
Yeah, maybe they're supposed to make the right baby.
Yeah, I mean, you can go with it a lot of different ways. And so that's why I use fate bond instead of mate bond, because you can really use it far beyond shifter romances. And it can go a lot of fun ways. Usually it's interesting. A lot of people just use the trope of, oh, but I don't love you. So therefore that is our problem with this fate bond is I don't love you. And there's a lot more ways you can deal with fate bonds beyond the fact of, well, my feelings aren't in the right place. I mean, I have one novella coming out this year where my main character is extraordinarily pragmatic. She finds out she's in a fate bond. She says, okay, that makes my life easier. Political alliance. This works. And because we're tied together, you won't kill me. Sign a contract. Awesome. Let's not really deal with the emotions. That's kind of dumb. And it's a very different way of looking at it than getting all angsty over your feelings.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a magical thing. There's also the betrothal trope, which I think is very similar. Usually it's political. And usually it does fall in that same, usually the girl is resisting it. She doesn't want to marry the guy. I have a weakness for he dresses up as a servant to try to court her before they meet thing. Of course, then you always get mad at him at the end because he usually keeps the illusion going way too long for some sort of big dramatic reveal. And then you just want her to slap him.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, I'd be like, you could have told me sooner. I'm just going to say I don't like you now because you didn't tell me soon enough, because you lied to me, and that's kind of annoying.
Like, hey, by the way, we're engaged.
And so that's where, again, the hard thing is as Heidi mentioned, that a lot of times these tropes are drug out I'm not going into tenses right now. But the point is they are extended beyond what readers really have an appreciation for. Especially if the romance is the core of the story, because you can feel the writer just going, but if I don't drag this out, then I won't have a book and it won't be long enough and I won't get it published the way I want to. And that's where, again, having romantic subplots saves your story, because then you can have your plot be about more than just the romance. So if the romance goes in a different direction, or if everyone acts just a little more sensibly than you wanted them to, it doesn't ruin your plot.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with novellas too, people.
Yes. There's so much easier to read on your cell phone. Like, I love reading a novella on my phone. It's great.
Yeah, and it gets that Goodreads challenge just that much ahead.
Yes. Oh, man. All right. The next set of tropes we're going to tackle are the classic tropes. These are the ones that have existed more or less for centuries or even millennia. These are ones that you can think of. Maybe you were familiar with them as children. And Heidi, of course, has our first one here, which is
True Love's Kiss. And I guess you're not so much a sucker for this one, Janeen, but I kind of like it. I mean, it's that whole, I have a whole book where the whole thing is the princess is saving her true love's kiss, and it wasn't in like a true love's wait sort of way. It's just almost like a ace she's got in her pocket just in case she gets enchanted. It's like, but I've got to save my true love's kiss because I could end up a frog.
Okay. I have nothing against. I get the idea of a true love's kiss being like a symbol of innocence and purity and the love of itself coming out. But the thing is, I always had an issue as a child because this is lips. This is your mouth. This is the thing you have to like, brush your teeth and use mouthwash and everything. And this is the place of purity and peace, is the place that like, there's saliva in there. So I always had an issue with like true love's kiss being a thing because my pragmatic child brain was just like, but that's a place of gross. You barf out of there. So I'm like, so my thought is maybe we should just have like true love's Eskimo kiss with like rubbing noses or something. Like if you're really going to go for like sweet and innocent, why do we choose the mouth? But then again, like heritage, it's mythology, it's our traditions. I get it. I just was like, but it doesn't seem like the most innocent part of the body.
I like it too because it lets you take the first kiss between a couple and like really make it a big thing. Depending on the situation, not every first kiss is a thing. Sometimes the guy just stills it while you're not looking on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
Ooh, so we're getting some backstory there, huh?
Oh yeah. So it's like I was not I was like, what? It can be, depending on the personalities involved, it can be kind of like a sneaky thing. It can be a quick thing. It can be a really awkward thing. But if it's like a life or death situation, sometimes it just lets you like focus in on that and build up the drama around it. So it can turn something that might be a little bit throwaway into a big thing, which is what I like about it. I like drawing that out into like a kiss explosion.
Yeah, and the thing is, because especially if you're trying to add little bits of romantic elements into larger stories, leading up to the kiss and making the kiss special, or in some way making it like a big deal, means that you don't have to feel the need to go beyond that. And so in your book, if you really don't want to like deal with anything beyond kissing or sex or anything, then you don't have to. You can just build up to the kiss and then get on your merry way, and that's it. And then have all your explosions and all your major part of your plot happening without the romance getting too entangled with it. But yeah, my first kiss was actually incredibly awkward. And remember, I waited until I was engaged, and then we kissed for the first time. And my first thought, and I said this because I sometimes say these things out loud, was, "Oh, that's it."
Yeah, I got a sneak kiss. So.
Yeah. There wasn't really like any like sneakiness about it or anything. And I did that. And I think my fiance at the time, who's now my husband, was like, "Well, it gets better as you practice." I'm like, "Okay, then we can work with that."
Yeah, my husband was like, "Well, you don't have to be so reserved." And that was not like our first kiss because he sneak attacked me, so I didn't have to prep, but like later the same day. So I had some instruction.
Okay, all right. And then, of course, there's another classic trope, and that is the love-hate couple. My first thought when I saw love-hate couple was, of course, Beatrice and Benedict from Much Ado About Nothing, where pretty much most of the play is them mocking each other and sparring with each other. And then something similar happens in Taming of the Shrew. That one has some really weird subtext, so that's not the greatest example of the love-hate couple because some really odd things. Yeah, we'll stick with Much Ado About Nothing. That's much better. But the idea of the couple that has the battle of wits, and I can enjoy this one a lot because it's very much like a meeting of the minds. It can be very much, falling in love with someone because of their words and what they say to you. And that's the whole thing with the love-hate couple, is that you really don't want them to seriously, terribly, unrelentingly always hate each other, because then it's really hard to ship them because there's no real thread of commonality there. So the key is having them spar in ways that make you say, ooh, they could be really good if they just get over themselves, but don't get over themselves too much, because I like the sparring.
Yeah, well, it's Pride and Prejudice, it's Han and Leia. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of really classic ones. I think what I don't like is when they're unevenly matched. An even match in a battle of wits I like, but if it's one of them just being jumping all over the person with insults and the other one kind of like being hurt by it and then getting angry and emotionally but not able to keep up with the wits, then that just gets so awkward.
No, you've got to keep it to a certain extent. You almost have to keep it going for two levels to make it work for a love-hate couple. You have to have like a high-end level where they're sparring with their words, and then a whole other subtext where their bodies are showing different kinds of language or their feelings are going in different places than where their words are going. And so the reader knows that there's more happening than just them snarking at each other.
Yeah, and you have to have some level of fun to it. And you got to get the idea that they're not doing this just to be miserable. They're doing it because they kind of start to enjoy picking at each other, and maybe even enjoy it when the other person gets in a really good hit. It's like, I see what you did there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a battle of wits, like with sabers, only, with words instead. And again, that's different than if you have couples that are really seriously having massive fights and arguments and keep having massive fights and arguments. That's not the same as a love-hate couple. That's a couple that's going through some serious issues and might be going a lot more towards soap opera or drama.
Yeah, and I don't like to, at the end of the story, I don't root for characters to get together if I don't think they can stay together. One of the shows I followed for a long time, House, had that with House and Cuddy. It's like there was like a will they, won't they for several seasons. And when they finally did, you were just waiting for them to break up because they had so many issues. You just knew it couldn't work. And so instead of having like that relief you feel when some people get together, which is what I think you want to feel fulfilled through them. You felt this sense of overwhelming dread about what's going to come next.
Yeah, that's another thing too. In a love-hate couple, when they do get together, find a way to keep the spark going. Because again, we all know those stories or those TV shows where you have a couple that's like a will they or won't they, constantly snarking and sparring and giving each other sidelong glances. They get together and somehow the chemistry just dies because they suddenly become ooey and gooey and mushy and all these things, and all the fun wit and everything that kept them together and kept them sharp is gone. So, don't give them personality lobotomies after they get together.
Yeah, Suits did that pretty good. I like Mike and Rachel still kept kind of an edge throughout theirs, so that it can be done. I think that the Moonlighting Curse is what you think of. That was like the first incidence of it. That's probably too old a reference for our audience, don't you think? Did I just go too deep?
It's okay. They can look it up online.
Okay, they can look it up. That's what Wikipedia is for, people.
The last thing we have are the hated tropes. These are the ones that get complained about on writers' forums and readers' groups and anywhere people talk about books and romance. These are the favorite whipping boys, as it were, of the romance trope world. The thing is that we at Indie Book Magic don't necessarily believe in a bad trope. We just believe in poor execution of the trope. And we're all about taking the trope and finding ways of fixing the trope so that it works better. And so that's what we're going to kind of look at for these next tropes. And of course, the first one is insta-love, which Heidi's going to tackle.
Yeah, I think a lot of us come into contact first with this Disney. You see Aladdin peering over the edge of his whatever he's peering over, and he sees Jasmine walking through the market, and he is suddenly like so in love that his little toy monkey is knocking him on the head, trying to get him to wake up. And it happens like that. And we're like, well, does that really mean anything? Because I think when you're an adult, you know that it takes a lot more than just seeing someone across a marketplace to know you're going to click. So insta-love can be problematic because a lot of people, A, don't believe it, and B, it feels unearned. It feels like the author didn't really work for it. But at the same time, love at first sight is kind of a thing. You read about it not just in fiction. It's historically, I don't know if I want to say historically, but you'll read personal accounts and memoirs where they saw their future spouse walk into a room and just suddenly the whole world changed.
Yeah, and that's a thing, and it's fine. The thing is, it's one of those things that's hard to put into stories because readers want to see the growth. They want to see the development. They want to see these things together. And if you have an insta-love on both sides, which is another thing with Romeo and Juliet that's made it a little bit wonky, is not just the star-crossed, but the fact they saw each other and suddenly, the world vanished. And it was on both sides. The reader feels cheated because they are like, I want to see these guys grow together. And suddenly you took that away from me because they instantly love each other. There's a couple ways you can kind of fix that. You can actually have them insta-love, but then have difficulties later on they have to work through. Or you could have it just be one-sided. One-sided insta-love goes from being like obnoxious to being like, oh, this is fun and awkward. And you actually see a fair amount of that in romantic comedies and those things. It can be a little bit unhealthy if the person that they're into is really not back into them, and then you make a whole different metaphor about don't love someone who will never love you back. But if you know that if it's between two people that the reader knows are meant to be together, then go ahead and have one side fall in love first and the other side has to figure it out.
And if you've got this, there's a certain personality type. I think it's a lot easier with a girl, but maybe that's just because I recognize it. It's that ability to get fascinated with something just from the little thing. Like you walk into a room and you see he's got the t-shirt for the band you like, and automatically you're like keyed in and like, oh, we have a connection. And then her brain starts working on all the things and watching him do it. Look at how he's handling that pencil. It's
Wow.
if you want to fall in love, you can find reasons to pretty easily. It doesn't take that long of staring at a person to just get all these things that you can be obsessed with. And I get obsessed with people really easy, like even like not in a romantic way. Like my I don't really want to call them celebrity crushes, but I'll connect with somebody I see on a TV or show and something, and I'll just start finding out everything about them and like compiling information and like sorting them into my little fascination index of things that make them amazing. And so, yeah, you can do that. It doesn't take very long, and it can really get itself seated. And then before you know it, you're like, why am I so obsessed with this person? So, yeah, I think that exists. And if you play it right, especially if you keep kind of a lighter tone as opposed to a more dramatic, obsessive, sighing all the time tone,
Not
I think
including stalker stories. That's a very different thing, and that's not romantic in the way that we're talking about. You can do a stalker idea, but just understand that it's not the same thing as a romantic trope. Things are supposed to turn out well.
yeah, there's a difference between memorizing a guy's favorite bands and listening to the same songs in your off time and like showing up under his bedroom window playing music very softly wearing a creepy stalker mask.
And that's interesting enough because in the right context, that could be romantic, but that's after the relationship has gotten to a certain level of intimacy.
Yeah, he has to know who you are.
Yes. And then the other one we're having to tackle, and this is one of my favorite ones to try to redeem, has come up in previous conversations, and I am only slightly proud of the fact that I have managed to fix this one of my own books, is the love triangle. And with the love triangle, the first thing I always say again is please forget Twilight. Twilight was one of the worst examples of it. The idea of these two guys helplessly in love with this girl and her helplessly in love with both of them is actually complete escapism. That's not the way love triangles have to work, should work, or often do work in real life. In fact, if you actually are in a place where they can happen in real life, like college, it's usually two guys like the same girl. They talk about it. She decides she wants to date the one. The other one goes on with his life and dates someone else. This whole big melodrama thing, I'm assuming can happen in real life, but does not happen nearly as much as people think it does from TV shows. So the love triangle, aside from that, can be really fun because people can do really dumb and interesting and plot-moving things out of that sense of love that they feel, and that can be really fun for your stories.
And I think a lot of the things people have trouble with on love triangles is the characters a lot. I mean, the wishy-washy girl who can't make up her mind, so she just keeps stringing both the guys along. It's not that you hate love triangles, you don't like her. Or the girl who, for some reason, has boys tripping over her. And I remember reading one book where I stopped reading the book after the fifth guy fell in love with her in like half the book. And I was like, I don't believe there's anyone that well, maybe there is, but if so, they probably have evil sorcerer magic.
Wait, so are you saying like all those like teen idols secretly have evil sorcerer magic? You know, the ones that people are like screaming at them and throwing their underwear on stage, like they're
boy bands sell their souls for sexual charisma.
There we go. But and the other thing with that is that notice you assume that it's the girl. Like in past books in previous centuries, love triangles could equally be the guy where two girls like him, or a love triangle doesn't have to be like both ways. So a girl could like a guy who likes someone else, or two girls could like the same guy, or there's more than one way to do it, and it doesn't have to be requited. It doesn't mean that the object of double affection has to like both individuals back. And in fact, it's a lot more interesting if they don't, and it can be very interesting if the object of multiple affections has no idea that more than one person likes them.
Oh, yeah. Because then you get a whole layer of like subtext and things that are said have more meaning she doesn't even know about. And it's, you can laugh at her.
And again, it can be a great way to like build drama. It can be a great way to not necessarily reflect on why is this person so awesome, But especially for the unrequited person, for the person who has some kind of love or affection for them, even though they know it's not returned, why is that character in that place? What are they trying to fulfill? Why are they staying in a situation where they love this person? Is it because they can't actually fall in love with someone they could have because they can't afford that? Or is it because they're just lonely and need to love someone because otherwise they'll be alone in life? Like, it says a lot more about the person who loves the individual and the individual themselves. And I think that's often missed in stories these days. And A Tale of Two Cities had a great love triangle. And one of the guys, ended up doing all kinds of awesome things. He knew his love would be unrequited, and he just kind of went on with his life and did awesome things in the French Revolution anyway. So what we're saying with insta-love and with love triangles is not that there have been awesome portrayals of them all the time. In fact, there have been some terrible portrayals of them. But don't let the fact that other people have done it poorly prevent you from trying to do it well. We believe in you authors. We believe that readers are looking for actual good renditions of these tropes, and there are ways that you can make them work. It doesn't mean you have to, but don't excuse them just because you had one bad experience or even 5 bad experiences. Be the one who gets it right.
Yeah, maybe love triangles are like Everest. A lot of people, don't make it to the top, but people keep trying. There's a reason.
That's right.
So I hope you guys have enjoyed this talk. And do you guys have, all you listeners out there, some favorite tropes, some least favorite tropes? Have you read a love triangle you thought was done really well? Let us know in the comments on wherever you're viewing this. And if you can, we would love to hear from you about what you think are the best love triangles, insta-loves, true love kiss, fate bonds, and all those tropes.
And if you're a little bit tired of all the romantic love this week, next week we're doing a Booksplosion episode discussing some of our favorite pairings in fiction. To give you a break from the mushy-gushy stuff, we're going to touch on some romance, but we're going to actually be dealing a lot with friendship, family, maybe even some beloved close bonds between someone and their favorite pet. So we're going to discuss favorite pairings in books in general, not just romantic ones, because there are different kinds of love out there, and we want to celebrate all of them in this wonderful month of February. And another shout out for you, if you have any pairings that you can think about in books that you've read that have been family pairings or friendship pairings or other kinds of pairings, romantic or otherwise, that you would like us to mention on the show or just to draw our attention to, go ahead and throw them down in a comment wherever you're listening to this. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to leave reviews wherever reviews can be left on SoundCloud or iTunes or our Facebook page. And have a fantastic day and pet a cat dragon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.